I never thought a simple dental appointment would turn into one of the most unforgettable moments of my life. It started like any other visit, bright lights, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the hum of machines, but the way his eyes lingered on me told a story I wasn't prepared for. There was something in his gaze that went far beyond routine checkups, something that made my heart beat faster and my breath catch in my throat. What happened inside that small clinic would blur every line I thought existed between professionalism and desire. Stay with me until the end of this story, because you won't believe how one unexpected glance turned into a moment that changed everything. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the stories that will keep you hooked and wanting more. Dentist offices always carried the same strange mix of calm and unease for me. The smell of antiseptic, the hum of a suction wand somewhere in the back, the fake orchids in the waiting room, all of it felt sterile but heavy, like a place where secrets could hide behind bright white walls. That morning, Boston rain slicked the sidewalks outside, and I kept telling myself it was just another checkup. Nothing more. "Evan?" a voice called, and I looked up to see the hygienist smiling politely. I followed her into the treatment room, sat down, and felt the chair cradle me back as she clipped the bib at my collarbone. I had been here before, of course. Twice a year. Same place, same dentist. But today felt different before he even walked in. Maybe it was me, maybe it was the way the rain echoed against the window, but something was stirring under my skin. The door opened and there he was. Dr. Miles Hart. He looked like someone who didn't quite belong in a dentist's office. Like life had given him another script, but he had chosen this one. His dark scrubs clung in the right places, his hair was just a little too long, and his eyes had that mix of alertness and tiredness that told me he carried more than his patient's charts home at night. He was the kind of man you notice without trying to. "Hey, Evan," he said casually, but the moment his gaze landed on me, I felt it. It wasn't just the glance of a professional looking at a patient. It lingered, just a second too long, like his eyes had something to confess before he could blink it away. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hey, Duck. Ready to tell me I floss wrong again?" He smiled under his mask. I could see it in the way his cheeks lifted. "That's the tradition." He pulled on gloves, adjusted the light above me, and began narrating the steps like always. But I wasn't hearing the words as much as I was feeling the pauses in between. When his knuckles brushed my jaw to tilt it just slightly, I swear I felt a jolt, like static caught between us. My breath caught, and for a moment, I wondered if he noticed. "So," he said, peering at the X-ray on the monitor. "A small area here on the upper right molar. Nothing serious. Just something we'll watch." "Good to know something in me is holding up," I said, half a joke, half an admission I hadn't meant to give away. His eyes flicked to mine. There was no condescension, no pity. Just a quiet wait. "Long week?" he asked, voice low. "Long season," I admitted, then regretted saying it. Patients don't confide in their dentists. But with him, it didn't feel out of place. He nodded slightly, the kind of nod that said I hear you without prying. And then he went back to work, but the air in the room had shifted. He asked about my job, and I asked about his running routine. The conversation looked normal on the surface, but under it there was an undertow pulling me closer to something I wasn't sure I wanted to name. When he leaned in, I could smell a faint trace of coffee on his breath beneath the mint. When his hand rested lightly on my shoulder to steady himself, the pressure stayed longer than it needed to. It was a checkup, yes, but it was also something else. Something unspoken but alive. Finally, he stripped off his gloves with a snap, tossed them away, and clicked off the overhead light. The room dimmed, softer now. I sat up, heart beating far too fast for someone who'd only had their teeth checked. "You're all set," he said, voice calm, though his hand hesitated at the counter. "Unless there's anything else?" The pause was deliberate. He didn't mean cavities or flossing. He meant something bigger, though he couldn't say it out loud. I searched his face for clarity, but before I could answer, a knock broke the moment. "Doctor, your noon patient is here," the receptionist said, poking her head in. "I'll be right there," he replied smoothly. When she left, his gaze came back to me, heavier now, like the words he hadn't said were burning his throat. "Listen," he began carefully. This may sound odd, but sometimes when people come in, I notice things that aren't dental. Tension. Just things that show up in the jaw, but aren't about the jaw. I swallowed, unsure whether to nod or run. You're saying I look stressed. I'm saying you look like you're carrying something. His voice dropped lower. And I don't know if that's my business. But I notice it. There was no lecture, no advice. Just an opening. And that, somehow, was worse. Or better. I couldn't decide. He turned toward the counter, scribbled something quickly, and slid a small card toward me. His professional smile returned, but his eyes betrayed it. Referral to my colleague for the night guard. She's great. I'll step back from treating you after today. It hit me like a door opening and closing at once. Wait, why? His mouth curved, but it wasn't a grin. Because sometimes the right boundaries are the only way anything else can exist. The words burned themselves into me. He wasn't saying what anything else was, but I knew. And I hated that I knew. The hygienist walked back in, chipper, handing me a bag with travel toothpaste and floss like nothing in the room had changed. She scheduled me with his colleague and I nodded dumbly, clutching the card in my palm. When I stepped outside, the rain had turned to a mist that clung to my jacket. I looked down at the card again. His office email was printed on it, but beneath, in his handwriting, was something else. Blue Finch Cafe, back patio. After hours. No pressure. I stood under the awning, my pulse hammering. Was this real? Was he actually giving me a way past the boundaries he had just drawn? Or was I reading too much into a note written in shaky pen? Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Evan. His voice, steady but lower, stripped of the professional polish. It's Miles. I wanted to make sure you got home safe in the rain. I wanted you to have my number. In case you wanted to use it. I froze beneath the awning, the cafe sign glowing across the street. My heart pounded, and the card trembled between my fingers. Then I heard footsteps. Someone I knew, someone from work, was walking toward me, eyes narrowing at the sight of me holding the card outside the cafe. And just like that, I realized I had only 1 second to choose what truth I was willing to live. The card with his handwritten note burned against my palm as I shoved it into my pocket, praying my coworker hadn't seen it. I forced a casual smile, gave a quick wave, and mumbled something about running late. They passed without question, but my chest was still tight when I turned back toward the street. Across the way, the glow of the Blue Finch Cafe sign flickered against the damp pavement, like a signal meant only for me. I told myself to go home, to forget all of it. He was my dentist, for God's sake. But every step toward the subway felt like I was walking away from something that had already pulled its hook into me. By the time I reached the corner, I wasn't even surprised when my phone buzzed again. Still raining. You close by? It was him. Us. My thumbs hesitated over the keyboard before I typed. I'm nearby. Should I come? There was no pause. If you want. Back patio's quiet. No expectations. That phrase, no expectations, was exactly the kind of lie you tell yourself when expectations are all you have. My feet carried me before my brain could catch up. Within minutes, I was pushing through the cafe's side gate, rain dripping from the awning onto the empty patio. And there he was, leaning against the wooden fence, jacket unzipped, hair damp from the mist. He looked less like a doctor and more like someone stripped of his armor. You came, he said softly. I laughed under my breath, more nervous than amused. Apparently. For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the metal tables. He didn't rush to fill it, and neither did I. It was as if the weight of what hung unsaid had already spoken louder than either of us could manage. Finally, he looked at me, not clinically, not professionally, but directly, like every layer of pretense had been peeled away. I shouldn't have given you that note, he admitted. Boundaries matter. But I couldn't stop myself. I felt my chest tighten. So why here? Why tonight? His mouth curved into something between a smile and a grimace. Because I've been watching you walk into that office for almost 2 years. Because I've noticed things I shouldn't notice, how you laugh when you're uncomfortable, how your eyes avoid mine when I get too close, how you relax the second I stop talking about teeth." He let out a shaky breath. "And because I'm tired of pretending it's just about teeth." I wanted to tell him I hadn't noticed. But that would have been a lie. Instead, I said the only thing that felt safe. "What are you hoping happens here, Miles?" His eyes searched mine, as if the answer was hidden somewhere between fear and desire. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I know I don't want this to disappear into another appointment with someone else's name on the chart." Something in me cracked open at that. For so long, I had convinced myself that the things I wanted were inconvenient, impractical, dangerous even. But standing there, rain dripping onto my shoes, his words felt like permission. I took a step closer. "Then maybe we stop pretending." His breath hitched, and for a second, I thought the world itself paused. Then he closed the gap, not fully, but enough for the air between us to vibrate with what could happen. His hand hovered near my arm, not touching, just trembling there. "Evan," he whispered, my name heavy in his mouth, and then a sharp voice cut through the rain. "Dr. Hart." We both froze. At the edge of the patio, under the yellow glow of the cafe sign, stood a woman in a navy coat, umbrella dripping. She was older, mid-40s maybe, with the same piercing eyes as him. Miles stiffened, jaw tightening. "Mom." My stomach dropped. His mother. Her gaze darted from him to me, sharp and assessing. "I thought I'd find you here." "The receptionist called. Said you'd left early." She narrowed her eyes, stepping closer. "And who's this?" I opened my mouth, but Miles spoke first. "A friend," he said quickly, almost too quickly. The word hung in the air, flimsy and insufficient. She studied me like she was reading more than I wanted her to see. Then she turned back to him, her voice low but firm. "You know how this looks. You know what your father would say if he—" "Enough," Miles snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him. His hands shook slightly as he ran them through his damp hair. "Not tonight." She pressed her lips into a thin line, but didn't argue further. Instead, she cast me one last look, sharp as broken glass, before pulling her umbrella tight and walking away into the mist. I stood frozen, the sound of her footsteps fading, my pulse loud in my ears. Miles exhaled shakily, sinking onto one of the wet chairs. "I'm sorry. You weren't supposed to see that." "What just happened?" I asked, still reeling. He rubbed his temples. "She doesn't know me." "Not really. Or maybe she does but refuses to admit it. Either way, this isn't how I wanted you to meet her." I sat across from him, the rain mist cooling my flushed skin. "So now what?" He looked up, eyes tired but burning. "Now you have to decide if you want to walk away before this gets complicated. Because trust me, it will." The challenge in his voice was undeniable. And yet, so was the pull I felt toward him. Complicated didn't scare me. Losing the chance to find out what this was, that terrified me. I leaned forward, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I don't think I can walk away." The corner of his mouth twitched, the faintest smile breaking through his exhaustion. "Then you should know what you're stepping into." Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of hurried footsteps returned. But this time, it wasn't his mother. It was someone else, male, angry, storming toward us through the rain with a clenched fist. And the way Miles's face drained of color told me this wasn't just anyone. The man stormed across the patio like a storm in human form, rain dripping from his hair and fury burning in his eyes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and every step he took seemed charged with accusation. I could feel the air thicken between us before he even spoke. "Miles," he barked, his voice low but seething. "What the hell is this?" I froze, caught between the instinct to defend myself and the realization that I didn't even know who he was. Miles stood quickly, his chair scraping loudly against the wet concrete. "Caleb, not here," Miles said firmly, his voice steadier than I expected. The name hit me like a jolt. Caleb. Whoever he was, he knew Miles well enough to speak with authority, well enough to make Miles's hands clench into fists at his sides. Caleb's eyes cut toward me, sharp and unrelenting. "And who's he?" I swallowed hard, glancing at Miles, waiting for him to answer. But he hesitated, jaw tight, as though the word for what I was didn't exist yet. Caleb scoffed, stepping closer. Another secret, huh? Another late-night excuse? The rain drummed harder against the awning, matching the pounding of my pulse. I think I should go, I muttered, starting to stand, but Miles's hand shot out, gripping my arm with quiet desperation. No, he said, eyes locked on mine. Stay. That single word carried a weight that silenced me. Caleb saw it too. His lips twisted into something between a smirk and a grimace. So that's how it is, Caleb said bitterly. All the lectures, all the warnings, and now this. Enough, Miles snapped, louder now. His voice cracked through the rain like thunder. You don't get to decide who I talk to, Caleb. Not anymore. The tension between them was electric, charged with a history I didn't understand. I wanted to ask, to demand answers, but I couldn't move, couldn't break the spell of their confrontation. Caleb's voice dropped, low and cutting. You're making a mistake. And when it blows up in your face, don't come running back. He turned on his heel, disappearing into the misty street, leaving behind the echo of words that stung even though they weren't meant for me. Miles exhaled shakily, running a hand through his damp hair. He looked exhausted, stripped raw. I'm sorry you had to see that, he said quietly. Who is he? I asked, my voice tentative. Miles hesitated before answering. He's someone I used to trust. Someone who thought he knew what was best for me. But he never did. I waited for more, but Miles's eyes shifted away, his silence speaking louder than any confession. We sat there for a long moment, the rain filling the gaps between us. My mind spun with questions, but one thought drowned out the rest. Why had he asked me to stay? Finally, Miles looked back at me. His eyes, though tired, burned with intensity. You don't have to be part of this, he said. It's messy, it's complicated, and it's only going to get harder. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, the decision already made. I told you, I'm not walking away. His shoulders dropped slightly as though a weight had lifted. For the first time, I saw something fragile in his expression, something vulnerable that made me want to close the space between us. But before I could, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and the color drained from his face. It's my father, he murmured. His voice trembled in a way I hadn't heard before. I frowned. What does he want? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood abruptly, pacing the patio with restless energy. If he knows, if she told him. It hit me then. His mother. The look she had given me earlier, the sharpness in her voice. Had she gone straight to his father? Miles stopped pacing and turned to me, his face etched with panic. You need to understand something, he said urgently. My family, they don't forgive. They don't forget. If they find out about us, about me, it won't just be hard. It'll be dangerous. The word dangerous hung in the air, chilling me more than the rain. I stood, closing the distance between us. Then why risk this? I asked softly. Why me? He looked at me like the question had haunted him for months. Because with you, I don't feel like I'm pretending. And I can't let that go. Not anymore. The honesty in his voice struck me deep, unraveling every defense I'd built. I wanted to believe him, wanted to step into whatever this was, even if it scared me. I placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. Then we figure it out. Together. For a fleeting moment, his eyes softened, and the storm between us calmed. But then the phone buzzed again, louder this time, insistent. He stared at it, torn between answering and smashing it against the ground. Finally, he silenced the call, shoving the phone back into his pocket. Not tonight, he whispered, more to himself than to me. We stood there in silence, the rain easing into a drizzle. The world felt suspended, as if waiting for us to decide what came next. And then, just as the quiet began to feel safe, the cafe's back door creaked open. The manager stepped out, his eyes narrowing at the sight of us. You two need to leave, he said bluntly. Now. The finality in his voice cut through the fragile moment we'd built. Miles grabbed his jacket, his expression unreadable, and motioned for me to follow. As we stepped out into the damp street, side by side but not touching, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something bigger than either of us could control. Because whatever waited for us, his family, Caleb, the secrets he carried, it wasn't going to stay in the shadows much longer. The rain had slowed to a mist by the time we stepped out onto the quiet street, but the tension between us was louder than thunder. Miles walked fast, his hands jammed into his pockets, head down like he was trying to outrun everything. Caleb, his mother, that buzzing phone, maybe even me. I had to lengthen my stride just to keep up. "Where are we going?" I asked finally. He didn't answer right away. His shoulders rose and fell with a heavy sigh. "Somewhere private. Away from all that." We ducked into a narrow side street lined with shuttered shops and dim lamplight. The world felt like it had shrunk, leaving just the two of us in its center. Miles stopped under the awning of a bookstore, leaning against the brick wall, water dripping from his hair onto his shirt. He rubbed his face, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this," he muttered. "You didn't sign up for family wars and old grudges." I shook my head. "You didn't drag me anywhere. I walked in." That made him look at me, really look. His eyes were dark, filled with a storm of fear and longing. "You don't understand. My family, they don't just judge. They punish. Caleb, my mother, and especially my father. If he thinks He broke off, clenching his jaw. "If he thinks I'm stepping outside the path he's carved for me, it won't just be disapproval. It'll be exile." The word hit me hard. Exile. Like being cast out of his own life. "What path?" I asked quietly. His laugh was bitter, almost hollow. "The one where I marry the right woman, take over the practice, keep the family name shining. No risks, no scandal. Definitely no late nights in the rain with someone like you." I flinched, but he reached out quickly, his hand brushing my sleeve. "I didn't mean it like that. I meant someone who makes me forget all the rules." I felt a heat rise in my chest. For a moment, the noise of the world disappeared. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, that being near him had already unraveled things inside me I hadn't dared name. But before I could, the sharp buzz of his phone shattered the moment again. This time, he didn't silence it. He stared at the screen, his face pale. Then he turned the phone so I could see. "Father." My stomach tightened. "Answer," I said, though my voice was barely steady. He hesitated, then swiped to connect. "Hello." Even from where I stood, I could hear the booming voice on the other end. Male, deep, authoritative. "Miles. Your mother says you were seen with someone. Who is he?" Miles closed his eyes, pressing his hand to his forehead. "It's not what you think." "Don't lie to me," his father snapped. "You know what's at stake. I didn't build this life for you to throw it away on foolishness." The word stung, though it wasn't aimed directly at me. Miles met my gaze, torn, cornered. "He's a friend," he said flatly into the phone. Silence. Then his father's voice dropped, cold and sharp. "Come home. We'll discuss this face to face. And leave him behind." The call ended before Miles could respond. He stood frozen, phone still in his hand, like the weight of the command had anchored him to the ground. Finally he whispered, "I should go." Something inside me recoiled. "And leave me here? After everything you said?" He looked torn apart, his chest rising and falling with unsteady breaths. "If I don't go, it'll be worse. You don't know him, Evan. He doesn't make threats, he makes promises." I stepped closer, refusing to let him shut me out. "Then don't face him alone." He shook his head. "That's exactly what he'd expect me not to do. He'll use you against me." The street was silent except for the patter of rain against the pavement. I felt the fight between logic and longing in every beat of my heart. Finally I said, "So what? You go back to pretending? To being who he wants?" His silence was answer enough. I turned away, my throat tight. "If you walk away now, Miles, you're not just letting him win. You're letting yourself lose." The words hung there like smoke, impossible to ignore. Miles stepped forward, his hand catching mine, his grip fierce, almost desperate. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been tearing myself apart over it for years?" His voice cracked. But choosing you means losing everything else. My family. My career. Everything I was raised to believe mattered. I searched his face, trying to find the man who had leaned toward me in the cafe, the one who had whispered my name like it meant more than survival. He was still there, but buried under layers of fear. My voice softened. Then maybe it's time to ask yourself what actually matters. For a long moment, he just stared at me, torn between the chains of his family and the possibility of something real with me. And then footsteps echoed down the alley. Two figures emerged from the mist, his mother, umbrella in hand, and beside her, Caleb, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on us. Enough of this, his mother said sharply. Miles, you're coming home. Caleb stepped forward, his tone low but biting. I warned you. And now you're dragging him into it. His glare burned into me. You don't belong here. You're the crack in the wall, and I'm not letting you break it down. Miles's hand tightened around mine, and for the first time, he didn't let go. No, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his body. I'm done letting you all decide for me. The alley went silent, the rain slowing to a drizzle, every eye locked on him. His mother's face hardened, Caleb's fists clenched, and I felt the weight of a battle that had only just begun. And in that moment I realized, whatever came next, the choice had already been made. The rain had almost stopped, but the alley felt suffocating, as if every breath carried the weight of generations pressing down on Miles. His mother's eyes blazed, Caleb's stance screamed confrontation, and my hand was still locked in his, warm, trembling, unyielding. Miles, his mother said, her voice low and cutting, think about what you're doing. About what this will cost you. Your father won't tolerate this deviation. That word, deviation, struck like a blade. I felt Miles flinch, but he didn't release my hand. He looked at her, pain and defiance flickering in his gaze. Maybe it's not about what he tolerates anymore. Maybe it's about what I can't keep hiding. Caleb stepped forward, his jaw set. You're throwing everything away for him? His finger jabbed toward me. For someone you barely know? The anger in his voice was sharp, but beneath it I caught something else, betrayal. Like this wasn't just about Miles's family, but about Caleb himself. Miles's voice cracked, raw but resolute. It's not about time. It's about truth. He sees me for who I am. Do you have any idea what that feels like, Caleb? After years of pretending? Caleb's face hardened, but his silence was louder than words. His mother shook her head, eyes glistening with something between anger and desperation. You think this is freedom, Miles? It's ruin. You'll lose your family, your career, your place. Do you really believe he can give you more than everything we've built? The alley fell silent, except for the drip of water from the awning. Miles's grip tightened around mine, and when he turned to me, his voice was softer, almost breaking. Can you give me something worth losing it all for? The question sliced through me, heavy and impossible. My heart raced as I searched for the right words. I can't promise perfection, Miles. I can't promise it won't hurt, or that it won't be messy. But I can promise you this, it'll be real. No lies, no hiding, no pretending. Just us. Something in his eyes shifted, fear giving way to clarity. He straightened, shoulders squared, and faced his mother. Then that's enough for me. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came. Caleb muttered something under his breath and stormed past us, his footsteps echoing into the distance. His mother stayed rooted in place, her face pale, her hands trembling as she whispered, "You'll regret this." Miles's voice was steady, though his hand shook in mine. Maybe, but at least it'll be my choice. She turned away, disappearing into the street, leaving the two of us standing alone in the quiet alley. The silence that followed was deafening. Miles's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, his eyes searching mine for something, assurance, maybe, or forgiveness for everything he'd dragged me into. I don't know what happens now, he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. But I know I can't go back. I stepped closer, my free hand resting against his damp shirt. Then don't. Go forward. For the first time that night, a fragile smile curved his lips. He leaned into me, not rushing, not hiding, just two people finally allowing themselves to be seen. And when his forehead rested against mine, the world outside the alley felt miles away. We didn't kiss then. Not yet. It wasn't about hunger or secrecy. It was about survival, about finally choosing honesty over fear. Later, as we walked side by side through the quiet streets, Miles slipped his hand into mine, no hesitation this time. Every passerby could see. And though my chest tightened with nerves, I felt something else, too, pride. When we reached the subway entrance, he stopped, pulling me back gently. "Thank you," he said. His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything left unsaid. "You don't have to thank me," I replied. "Just don't run from this. From us." He nodded, his eyes glistening, and for a moment I saw not the dentist, not the dutiful son, but the man who had chosen me over the silence of a life unlived. As the train roared in the distance, I realized something. Maybe the battle wasn't over. Maybe the world would push back harder than ever. But in that moment, with his hand in mine, it didn't matter. Because we had chosen each other. And sometimes, that's the only choice that changes everything. Life is full of moments where we're forced to choose between safety and truth, between acceptance and authenticity. Miles's choice wasn't easy. It never is when love demands courage, but it proved that sometimes the risk of being yourself is worth more than the comfort of being what others expect. Now I want to ask you, what would you choose if you had to risk everything for love? Have you ever walked away from someone's expectations to follow your own heart? If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that courage and love can overcome even the strongest walls.